Welcome inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller and Jeff Nowak wrapping up the final week of organized team activities for the Black and Gold. The media got to see their last session of the voluntary workouts. Next week, we'll be starting mandatory minicamp where those attendance numbers really matter. We'll be getting into some of the sound we got and also playing a little game with the Saints stock market, who are our risers and fallers from our 3 sessions that we got to see during these workouts. And the big one, Jeff, obviously the last session, the return of number 13.
Yes. Mike freaking Thomas, who Steve is busy taking unflattering pictures of from side angles at the podium. Jeez, man, get it together.
No, yeah, I've said, it looks like he's had too many charbroiled oysters or he's pregnant, but definitely an unflattering pick. I don't think Mike's as bulky as he looks, but definitely not in pristine shape yet.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who's been dealing with foot injuries for the last 3 years, right? Foot and ankle injuries. He probably isn't in the greatest shape right now, but that's okay, right? You got plenty of time. I'm not worried about it.
The picture does make me feel better about my gut.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're people too. Weird. It's crazy how that works. But all right. Yeah, we're going to get into this. So we're going to talk a bit about Michael Thomas. We're going to get into Bobby Hebert's take on attendance because I wanted to put a bow on that. Why is my camera phasing? The sun came out right as we started. That's what happened.
You have like the halo glow coming down on you.
Yeah, I look like I'm like in a dream sequence.
Right, that Tom and Jerry where it's like, Tom, come to heaven.
Right. But yeah, so we're going to get into that. We're going to hear from Dennis Allen on a few different topics. In the second segment, I trimmed down a good bit of the Derek Carr interview. So we're going to play a big chunk of that and we're going to talk about it. Yeah. And then in the final segment, as you mentioned, we're going to play the Saints version of the stock market, which thankfully it's the Saints version, not the real version, because that means that there actually are climbing stocks as opposed to reality where, anyway, I don't want to talk about it. But yeah, so first things first, I made a big deal about Bobby's take on Mike Thomas showing up to practice, which did Bobby shame Mike into showing up? Like I do kind of feel like that's a possibility because I mean, I don't know, maybe he planned to show up all along, but the fact is Bobby made a big deal about it and then he was there. So
no, I totally gave him his props again. Last season, I was like, well, you were the one that was all over Andy Dalton being the head of Jameis Winston. And by this season, you called out Michael Thomas and poof, he shows up at voluntary workouts. Like we said, we fully expect him at the mandatory minicamp. But for Mike to come out that last day, it was like that light shining down in your room when he came out onto the field. And I heard the angels singing, and number 13 strode out there. It was an unexpected huge positive that we've heard all the talk about how committed and how much he wants to be a part of this team, obviously, and coming out for the voluntary workouts to me says a lot.
Yeah, and we before I get into the Bobby clip, I do want to play the clip from Derek McCoy because if you're wondering, it was a surprise to us. But it was also a surprise to the team. So if you were wondering whether this was kind of a plan and everyone was kind of aware, Mike's going to be here for the third session, at least from an offensive line perspective, that was not the case. Here's what Eric McCoy said.
Working with Derek Carr. Did you guys know Michael Thomas was going to run out on the field today?
No, but I'm glad he's here and I'm glad he's back. And I mean, I saw him working off to the side and he's ready.
What can that, just do for the team seeing a guy like that come out here to voluntary practices?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, you look at what he's done in the past. He's one of the best receivers in the NFL. And just having him back out there working with us during a voluntary moment, it's exciting because you see that he's ready and he's working.
Yeah, and so they didn't know. Maybe the wide receivers knew, maybe the coaches knew. I don't know. Maybe Derek Carr knew. I'm sure they text. But Mike's out there, and his teammates are glad to see him. I'm glad to see him. Bobby's glad to see him. And with that in mind, here is kind of the follow-up. I do feel like I have to follow up on this because I said, hey, if you're gonna complain about Mike Thomas, you have to keep that same energy for all the other guys. And now you look at it like Mike Thomas did show up, right? So what about these other guys that we just ignored and pretended it's no big deal that they're not here? But here's what Bobby had to say yesterday on the show.
We need everybody out there. I got a text earlier, and I said I should have mentioned this. I don't know. If you're a leader on the team and you've established yourself, I think whether it's voluntary or not, it's not too demanding. Because when pro football's over, it's over. Then you could be a hermit or be an introvert and have your lifestyle. But that's why I respect like the Cam Jordans and DeMario Davis of the world when they're leading their team. And it's not just Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas showing up. Where in the hell is Taysom Hill? I think he's an upstanding citizen. But where's Taysom Hill? Or even Alvin Kamara. Aren't you part of this team, Alvin Kamara? You still be part of the team, whatever comes about in Las Vegas at the end of July. So I'm just looking like Marshawn Lattimore. So where's Lattimore? He's getting full? What is he?
But as a former player, did you have voluntary workouts in your time?
No, we had a mandatory mini camp. And then they didn't even have like you train and all. You wouldn't do your own thing, but if the coaches wanted you there, you'd always show up.
I was going to say if it was a voluntary workout, would you be there?
Hell yes. I'm trying to prolong my career. I'm not like individual tennis player or golfer. I'm playing a team sport, so I wouldn't want to be the best example for my team. That's what I'm saying. Okay, like where. Like offensive line. We can't even put our offensive line together. So whether it's Ryan Ramczyk or whether it's Andres Pino, what is Andres Pino? He's in the freaking desert? What, he's hanging out in Arizona?
He's getting treatment on something, hopefully.
No, okay, if the team guarantees you $40 million, I'd freaking go to Siberia or whatever. We're going to hang out as a team, have some camaraderie.
Yeah.
Because it's the whole year-round relationship. But I don't know, they got different players, and there's so much money, and they feel like they could do what they want.
So, yeah, I will give Bobby credit. He is calling out everybody, so that's fair.
What I thought was funny, though, too, listening to it again, when he says, where the freak is Taysom Hill, he's an upstanding citizen. What does that mean?
I don't know. I think he means that in the sense of he is a does anything asked of him type player, right? I think when you're talking about Mike Thomas compared to Taysom Hill in the arrival sense, it is this team has bent over backwards to accommodate Mike Thomas, right? And that can't be argued. They definitely have. And I think that's part of the sentiment when it comes to Mike of, man, this team has done everything it could possibly do to accommodate your injuries and your demeanor and you include you into this group and prop you up as the star, right? Even though you have not been on the field for the past 3 years. Every word from the front office, everything, it's like, no, Mike's the guy. He's still the guy. I get it. He hasn't played, but he's still the guy. Taysom Hill, it's like, hey, Taysom, you're tight end now. And he's like, good deal.
Thanks.
And like in the back of my head, you're like, is he really happy about it? I don't know, but he's never going to say that. He's never going to come out and be like, this is malarkey. I want to be a quarterback. Trade me to somewhere they'll play me at quarterback, right? Give me a chance to be the quarterback. Let me compete to be the backup. He's not going to say that. So I think that's what Bobby means when he says upstanding citizen. But because of the Saints and the situation they're in with Alvin Kamara and Marcus May and like literally facing criminal charges about stuff, I think there is also the element of that too. Like you're not worried about Taysom getting into a 4 a.m. bar fight. So that's part of it too.
Yeah, with Taysom, I think we had the question, or it might have been with one of the guys, we're talking at practices, when he does come, obviously, next week for the mandatory sessions, wondering if it's still going to be in that tight end group. And I think Dennis Allen made that clear, he's still going to be working with that group kind of deal.
Yeah, there's no gray area. I know Bobby, excuse me. I know Bobby talked about it with Nick Underhill on the show a few days ago, maybe last week. And, they were talking about, maybe they'll shift him into the running back room. Maybe they'll do something else with him because, he's not really a tight end, or at least he didn't play tight end last year. But, there was no thought. It was an immediate, like, he's still going to be, like, nothing's going to change with his role. in terms of Taysom Hill. But, I do think that maybe that's a sign that he's going to get more involved in that part of the game. Like, that's the question to me, is not necessarily where he lines up. Are you going to actually use him as a tight end? Because if you do, then it makes sense to me. If you're going to continue to run him as a quarterback the way you have, then why would you just why are you wasting his time is I guess the question, right? Like, why that can't be beneficial for him to sit in the tight end room if he's not doing any tight end things.
Yeah, and what's funny with this Saints team, that big question of this tight end group going into organized team activities, at least suddenly we're spilling over with a bunch of guys, obviously with the additions of Foster Moreau and now even a Jesse James, who talked about, getting to be early in someone's camp. He hadn't been able to do that in a couple of years.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. He said a few things. So here's that audio. We're going to play it right here. He didn't talk a lot. He doesn't sound like a very talkative guy, but I do think he is happy to get a chance to just compete throughout the offseason, right? Because it's something he hasn't had a chance to do probably since he was with the Steelers. But here's that audio.
How did this all come together with you signing with the Saints?
I just came in, worked out, and got signed. Like I said, I knew Clancy from my days in Chicago, so having a working relationship with him definitely helps. This is the first time I've been signed before camp in a couple of years, so it's been good.
What have been your early impressions of the offense?
I like it. I like the style. They've been here for a while. The offense has been here for a long time, so they have different nuances, and just learn it day by day and take it as it goes.
How would you say the way your career's gone so far has affected or influenced your outlook on this whole pro football thing, and what are you hoping for?
My outlook. Still love the game. Still have more left in me to give. So excited where I'm at. Going into year 9. Just take it one day at a time and enjoy it while it lasts.
Was that you catching that like a back shoulder seam later in red zone? Just kind of talk about that play. I think it was James that threw it to you, right?
Yeah. Just worked the linebacker over the middle of the field and just he put it in there good. So just a simple play, makes it easy whenever he has the space to throw it in the back shoulder.
Jesse, is this position unique in any way with regards to the other tight ends on the team? I mean, compared to other teams you've been on with, Juwan and Foster as part of this tight end room?
It's hard to tell this early exactly how the roles play out and things go. But excited to work with these guys. They're a great group. A lot of talent in the room, so it's going to be a fun year for us.
Is it also cool to know that there's a lot of new faces, so it's not like you're brand new because there's a new quarterback, new running back, new tight ends that are brought in?
Yeah, like I said earlier, last year I signed in September. The year before that I signed the first day of camp. So having this extra couple weeks is going to be good for me to just kind of train what I'm training for in the offseason. Is going to be easier for me.
Yeah, to me, that said, obviously, for some guys, for a lot of guys, these OTAs are important as much as we kind of laugh and brush them off. They're voluntary. There's no real contact going on. But you heard right there how, glad this veteran is to be early on in the camp because he hasn't had that experience the past couple of years.
Yeah, and so if you're watching, the highlights from yesterday's practice, which you can find them on YouTube, if you're, watching or listening to this podcast, there is a YouTube version where we're playing some clips in the background. Jesse is number 81. I think that was Nick Vanette this time last year, and they, kind of a similar build, right? Just big dude, kind of your profile as a blocker, but he did catch some passes. I think it was Sean Fazen that pointed out that he caught a touchdown pass from Jameis Winston in the red zone drills. It was one of multiple instances where Nick Anderson got kind of picked on in coverage a little bit. And, that's where if I'm Nick Anderson, that's the part of my game that I'm trying to clean up because you're going to get targeted like that. You got to hold up in coverage if you're going to be an undersized linebacker because you have to be a cover linebacker. But Jesse James was able to catch a touchdown. I think it was Jack Collada that pointed out, and I think it's a good point. If you're joining a tight end room for, as a new guy, as a veteran who is just looking for a chance to contribute, this is a pretty good tight end room to join, right? Like, I mean, Adam Troutman's gone. Juwan Johnson is entrenched. Taysom Hill is still there, but again, we talked about like his role doesn't really exist as a tight end.
Right.
So if I'm Jesse James, I'm like, you know what? Why not me? Right? Like they did sign Foster Moreau, and I'm sure he's going to get his chances. But what if Jesse James outplays Foster? What if he is the better option? And they're starting from square one at the same time. And if Foster is not able to hold up as a blocker in certain instances, and you just need a big guy to be a tight end, I think Jesse James has a chance to contribute. So I just think it's a good point. Like, this isn't a tight end room where you're just adding camp bodies, which I think you could say in the past when you had a Jared Cook and a Josh Hill, you added a body in camp and it was like, they're not making the roster. Like, we know what the roles are. Right now, I think there's some roles up for grabs on this team. And I think Jesse, as much as anybody, has a chance to make an impact.
One thing on Foster Moreau, after the organized team activity session, we get to do some locker room time. And for whatever reason, he decided when he left the locker room, he was just going to shut off all the lights. And I happened to be standing next to Demario Davis's son, and he's looking at me going, "What's going on? What happened?" And I was just like, "Oh, Foster left the room and is being a jokester and shut the lights off kind of thing. No big deal. We didn't lose power or anything." But yeah,
he was joking.
Yeah,
it was like a prank.
Yeah, for whatever reason, Morrow decided when I leave the locker room, I'm shutting off all the lights, and I was like, okay. And I mean, obviously, it's not my go over and turn the lights back on. So I was waiting for someone else to do it. But yeah, clearly saw him do that, and it was just a kind of funny thing. I guess he's already comfortable of messing with the guys, that camaraderie, whatever you want to call it, building there. So yeah, I see like he might be one of the jokesters, quote unquote, in the locker room.
Yeah, I wasn't able to be in there yesterday. I had some scheduling mishaps, and obviously I had to come on and do a podcast on Tuesday, rather. But I imagine it gets pretty dark and there was no windows.
Right. No, that's why I was like, what's going on? And I was like, well, that dude over there, when he left, he shut the lights off.
Like, you probably had like the light from the kind of equipment area and
the TV.
Yes, the TV. Yeah, I guess there are TVs that give some light. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Okay. But yeah, one thing that stood out that, it's hard to quantify as you're kind of writing stuff up and you're talking about it. There's a lot of energy at that practice for an OTA session. It felt kind of like a mid training camp session where you're kind of getting geared up. Like, there was a lot of energy, a lot of chirping from the defense to the offense. It's part of it's being in red zone drills indoors, which when you're indoors doing red zone drills, the defensive players who are not lining up on the field are lined up at the back of the end zone. So they're just like, cheering and going, rah, rah, which it happens outside, but not quite to that same level. So I thought that was interesting. And on that front, if anyone's hopeful for the Saints to be included in Hard Knocks, they are one of the 4 teams that could potentially land on Hard Knocks. And if you're wondering whether the team, the coaching staff is interested in that, here is a pretty definitive statement on that front.
You guys are one of the 4 teams that could be forced on the Hard Knocks. How would you just feel about that if it was the Saints?
I wouldn't like it.
Yeah. Why not?
Because I just want to focus on our football team and getting better. And any distractions are exactly that. They're just distractions that keep you from ultimately reaching your goal.
To me, this is kind of funny just because, not with the Saints, but just in general, what are we waiting for? We know it's going to be the Jets and Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, you talk about it like, okay, the Saints could potentially be that team. But, I mean, are you really – if the goal is for the most eyeballs possible to watch it, of course it's going to be the Jets. Like, come on. It's the New York market, then it's Aaron Rodgers. Like, like maybe they pick the Saints just because they don't want it.
It would irk them off, right?
Because it definitely would annoy Dennis. Like, you can tell. Like, he's like, no, please do not force us to do this. We don't want it. And I understand why they don't want it. I don't want it. So that's kind of like, if that did happen, that would be so obnoxious from a coverage perspective.
I guess, yeah, you know what? The Hard Knocks is kind of like our escape from Saints camp. So it would be kind of like, oh, so we go to Saints training camp and then we come home and we watch more Saints training camp on HBO.
Camp, right? Yeah. I honestly, I get why people like Hard Knocks. I've never been a huge fan of it because, like, I spend all day dealing with it. I don't want to
Yeah.
go home and watch more training camp. Like, that's not what I want to go home and watch mindless stuff. Like, I
And
want
for
to
the-
watch the final season of Barry, even though the new app won't let me.
For the most part, it's really not that entertaining. But when I thought the Lions one was just because we had some former Saints, so kind of had some rooting interest in it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be entertaining if you're a huge Saints fan and you don't spend all day out watching the Saints. I get why
Yeah.
fans might want the Saints to be on Hard Knocks. So, like, from that perspective, I get it. Personally, I don't want them to. So
We could be on
hopefully-
HBO though, or Max now.
That's true. I guarantee you, we would end up on that in some capacity. Like, we would see ourselves because they just do all the recording, right? Like, we're in there in all those interviews. Like, they did that like promo before, I think, Thursday Night Football last year, and we were included in that. Like, the WWL coverage was included in that because NFL Films was there. But yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I think it's possible, but again, like you said, the NFL is.
Sorry, the other teams, what, Commanders and Bears, is it?
I'm not sure. I'd have to double
I
check.
think Bears, Commanders, Jets, Saints is the 4, and it's like, come on.
It's not going to be the Bears or the Commanders. Because, like, the only allure the Saints have, like, if this was just another season, if this was last year, right? If Andy Dalton was the quarterback, you'd be like, no way they're going to the Saints. You have Derek Carr, so there's that extra bit. But generally speaking, I don't think the Saints market size is going to be very attractive to the Hard Knocks producers. Like, why would it be? It's the smallest market.
I guess maybe we have a little bit of drama, obviously, with the Kamara case coming at the end of July. So that'd be some controversial stuff to talk about. The new quarterback, second-year head coach fighting for his. There are good storylines. I just don't know, if they're as interesting to folks outside of the New Orleans region. Whereas the Jets, obviously, the New York market and Aaron Rodgers is going to have that mass appeal, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and the fact is, if the networks thought the Saints were going to be a big ratings draw, they might have a primetime game this season. They really don't. You have Monday night in week 2, and then you have 2 Thursday night games. The rest are noon starts, and that's very much the network saying, we don't think people are going to watch you. Like, we're not putting you on national television because we want the teams that people are going to watch. So maybe that changes. I don't know. Maybe they get flexed into some primetime spots late in the season. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think that tells you all you need to know. But all right, let's wrap that segment up. We're going to come back. We're going to talk more about Derek Carr. First things first, I do want to mention we have a Twitter account now. I actually changed the Twitter handle since I told you what the Twitter handle was, which is probably bad form, but I think we're still early enough that I can get away with it. So I decided to do it, and only because it's available and it's just easy, a lot easier to say than the one I had initially created, which if you search for Inside Black and Gold, you'll find us. But the actual Twitter handle is @Saints_pod, which the fact that it was available at all felt like a steal to me. So even though it has nothing to do with the show other than Saints, I felt like it made sense. So if you are looking for the podcast, the Inside Black and Gold Twitter account, go to twitter.com/Saints_pod and you'll find us. Thought that was some premium real estate that I was able to get in on. So go check that out. We're going to be posting a lot of camp videos from that. I'm going to push a lot of the camp videos and obviously show content to that account. So if you'd like to keep up with the show, interact with the show, make sure to go check that out.
No, excited to keep growing some more, and we'll see what's next on the horizon.
Yeah. So keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold. Rate, subscribe, all that jazz. Who dat? And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold, segment number 2 of 3. If you were keeping score at home, I'm Jeff Nowak @Jeff_Nowak on Twitter. He's Steve Geller, WWL on Twitter. He's also Steve Geller in real life. And you can follow Inside Black and Gold on Twitter @Saints_pod. So check that out. But in this segment, I want to get into, take a deep dive into Derek Carr and his press conference. So I went ahead and I trimmed it down to about 10 minutes. He talks a lot. That's one thing we're learning about Derek Carr. He does not do short press conferences. I guess he would if we didn't ask any questions, but at the same time, I think maybe he wouldn't. Maybe if we didn't ask him any questions, he would just start talking because that guy talks. That guy is interesting when he talks. I think one of the reasons Andy Dalton had short press conferences last year is because he had nothing interesting to say. But, when you ask him questions, he gives you real answers. And I feel like I learn stuff when he talks, and it kind of reminds me of the Drew Brees press conferences where I will ask him legitimate strategy type questions and he will give you actual answers where you kind of actually get something out of it. And I don't think that's true of every quarterback. And he got asked about Jon Gruden, and in a lot of cases you could probably say, he'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
He gave a legitimate answer, and you're like, okay, cool. And I don't think I won't take that for granted because it's one of the few opportunities you have to get actual insight into what's going on the field beyond what you are seeing from someone who's actually doing it. And, I think he's interesting to listen to, and I've appreciated it thus far.
Totally agree with that. Obviously, we get to deal with a bunch of press conferences from coaches, players kind of deal. And typically you get a lot of player speak, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Last season, Andy Dalton, you're right. It was not particularly interesting, yet very vanilla, bland answers. And maybe that's just Andy Dalton. But yeah, I've found Derek Carr to be way more interesting, getting to learn obviously more about him and hearing him talk. Yeah, you're right. You feel like you're learning stuff as well. I totally appreciate it. And it doesn't feel like he's giving you that standard answer. It's really coming from the heart, or just, speaking from his mind. It's not rehearsed.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different ways you could talk to the media. Some guys are very cliche driven. Like Mike Thomas, I thought yesterday, very cliche driven, and that's fine. It's just it's part of the job, and you do it. And some people do it differently than others. I think Derek answers questions the way he does because he doesn't know any other way. And I felt that way about Drew too. Drew is just his the way his brain worked is he's just trying to answer questions. It's how he plays, right? He sees something, he's coming up with an answer, and he's delivering it. And, you kind of get the same impression from Derek, and it's almost to a fault at times, I think. I don't think he's necessarily always wanting to give that much information away, but sometimes he does. Sean was like that too. Sean was very much he was very guarded until you kind of got him going, until you kind of got him in storytelling mode. And then he would tell you stuff that he probably shouldn't say. You got a Walmart greeting job available for you if you keep throwing interceptions, which is what he said about the backup quarterback for the Broncos. He probably thinks about that afterward, being like, probably shouldn't have said that. But, when you are getting him going and you're hearing something, he will give you those nuggets of information. Who was it? Jeff Driscoll, I think, the quarterback. I don't know. Either way.
The backup in Denver?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know offhand, honestly.
I couldn't tell you. But either way, I think that's kind of what we're getting with Derek Carr. I'm looking forward to, during the season, knowing that this is how he operates. I think those post-game press conferences are going to be very, very intriguing to listen to. And we'll see. But either way, without further ado, here is that Derek Carr presser from the final open practice of organized team activities.
Derek, the things we see, when you throw past to Olave again in the red zone, to go over again, would that look like any OTA you've ever had before, or some of that new teammate stuff?
Oh yeah. If we ever miss something, I don't care if it's pass interference, which it might have been. I like talking trash. No matter what, if we don't hit it, especially you probably won't see it a lot, but during the season, training camp, we're trying to get all the reps in. There's a lot of time restrict, all that. But if I can try and fit it in right then, I'd try and get that rep again. So that's just something I've always done. If I can't do it right then, it's after practice. I already, the wideouts know if we miss anything, if there's something, I want you to remind me after practice because I'm going to be there to work. Come find me. And if a young guy forgets, I'll throw it to somebody else. But it's getting those reps again to where it just I feel perfect. I feel great about it. So then on Sunday, no, I've done it. I've already done it. I've already corrected it. And again, you try and complete them all, which has never been done, but you try your best to do it. And so it's always striving for that perfection is what I believe in, and knowing that you'll probably never get there, but you're going to wake up every morning and try to do it.
Derek, did you play a lot in the preseason with the Raiders, and the fact that you're on a new team, will that change your preseason preparations?
Yeah, for me, this will be 10 years of, football and live bullets. And so I haven't played much in the preseason before. I think maybe with Gruden, 1 or 2 total series in 4 years. There were some, times that I didn't play at all in the preseason, and we'd still, play good in the first couple weeks. So it proved to me that, if you practice the right way and you do things with those like joint practices, I don't know if we have them or not, but whenever you have those, like those are better than preseason reps because they actually show stuff. They show the pressures, they show different coverages rather than what they show in the preseason. And so that's just how it's been. Now, if they want me to play, I'm not against playing. Anytime I have the opportunity to put that jersey on, and it's a blessing to walk out on that field. So if they need me to play, I'll play. You only play 30 plays, I'll play 30 plays. You only play a whole half, I may question. No, I'm just kidding. But I'll play. It's like I'm never going to, feel like I don't need it. If you need me to play it, I think the coaches will probably want to see me, throw a couple in their jersey, So we'll see. We haven't even talked about it, if I'm honest, but if I play, awesome. If not, we'll make sure we're ready to go on week 1.
And all 3 quarterbacks were working with Mike one-on-one. I feel like you don't see that much in the middle practice. Did you guys request that to get more time with him?
Yeah, so I was going over certain plays, like just new plays for me, and just getting used to throwing all those reps. And so he was spotting up those routes for me, just where he would be, and in the same spot. So also he can come out of the break and see, it's funny to say, but not all quarterbacks throw the same type of ball. Some come out a little different. The spin is different, so just so he can get used to, catching those things from all different kind of route and angles and things like that.
This is the first time to talk to you since Gruden came. I just wondered if you could briefly kind of summarize how he influenced the way you play and what were the possible benefits of having him visit.
I can't express enough, how much I love, Coach Gruden. He's family to me. When all that, stuff happened, it was hard. It was hard for me because, you're mad, you're frustrated, but you still you don't stop loving him. I love that man and what he's meant to me in my career. Played my best football with him, and I admire him. I've seen him around his kids. I've seen him around Cindy. His wife. I know who he is. And I, love him deeply like family. So I can't express to you how much he means to me. And how hard of a time that was for me when all that stuff was happening. So, the fact that I got to see him again, give him a hug, it was like, he's saying, "Sir, I'm finishing this sentence," all this kind of stuff. It just comes back just like that. He's like, "What was this play?" And I could spit it out just like it was yesterday. It's like, what could have been. You think about those times. What could have been and all those kind of stuff. But I'm thankful to be here, and I'm thankful that I got to see him. Wearing our colors. It was neither of us thought a couple years ago that we'd be doing that, but here we are, and it was pretty special to have him around. To have a couple of my head coaches, DA and Grew, in the same room is awesome because they both know me, and you can hear them just communicate and things like that. It was pretty cool.
How much does you talked about like Michael Thomas? Everybody's right, nobody's wrong. Just kind of what do you like? What can Gruden do in the room with you and Pete and just kind of ideas that y'all bounce off each other? How does that work?
Yeah, like all speed option, triple option, wing tee. No, it's just another great football mind, and I just thought it was cool. Like, I've always believed this. Coach Olson, Greg Olson taught me this. Ole, I was going to say Ole. I didn't know if y'all know that, but Ole always said to me, he's like, and I always say it, it's like it's not about who's right, it's about what's right. And so anytime you can just gain more information, if you throw 100 things at me but only one thing stick, well, one thing got me better, and so having all those minds in the room, it's just cool to listen and just have that football communication, that talk. When you're in a room with people that love the game the same way and see it the same way, a lot of people love football, but not everybody sees it the same way. Trust me. We don't all see it the same way, but when you do see it the same way, it's fun to be in that room. Because I feel like that everyone could be at their best. Everyone's ideas make sense to each other. Everyone's receiving, ideas, even if it's new. And it was just cool to just sit there and enjoy the time, enjoy being around each other.
You were obviously upset when all the stuff happened with Gruden a few years ago. Did it take you two a long time to get back to kind of how you're saying now, back on the same page?
You know what? I tried my best. We had a lot go on. If you didn't know, everyone could look up that season. We had a lot of stuff happen, and with our football team. And my mentality with all of it, from a football aspect, was nobody cares. Nobody cares what I'm dealing with. Nobody cares what just happened with our team. We got to go win football games. So I really didn't get time to process anything. But during that, I was like, you know what? I have two choices. I can either be mad about it or I can choose to love them. And yes, I can be mad at certain things that were said or certain things that were done or decisions that were made. But at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. My choice was I was going to love them, because if no one else was, I was going to love them. If nobody else was going to love them, no one else was going to put their arm around them, I'm going to be the one that put my arm around them, because maybe 10 years down the road, they remember that and I can help them somehow, And, I'm not just talking about Gruden. There was a lot of stuff that was happening. So for me, after games, I remember I threw a touchdown on a certain play against the Eagles, and me and Gruden were neighbors, and I came home, and he was still living there at the time, and I walked over to his house, and I was like, hey, that was your play, T96, blah, blah. He was like, what? And, you could see just the emotion on his face, I wanted him to still feel a part of it, because I wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for him. And so I just tried to, even when things aren't perfect, you still try. At least I try my best to continue to love, the people that I'm called to love, and give them everything that I have. And so it didn't necessarily change. I just knew that he wasn't my coach, at that time anymore, and that was hard.
Were you involved at all in the decision for him to come in, or was that something? Did they talk to you at all? Did you know he was coming in?
They had mentioned it. Obviously, do you like him? Yeah. But that was all DA and the coaching staff, and Mickey and those guys. That wasn't me. It makes sense. I played my best football for him. So if anybody, trust me, I spent a lot of time with him. And so if anybody knows me, knows things about me that I don't know, he would know it. Him and Ole and Johnny Moe, they would know out of anybody in the world. So, those guys, because of it was the most recent also. I've grown so much since a few years before that, So, I think that would, from a football aspect, just trying to get, that next step. You don't want to start down here. What's another step we can take on understanding Derek during a game? They can ask questions that I can't answer. How's Derek react after this, or how's he do? I can't. I'm gonna answer it right, but Gru will tell the truth.
All right, so that was Derek Carr on Tuesday. There was about 10 minutes more of that interview that I cut out. We played a good bit of it yesterday, so I cut out the parts about him talking about Mike Thomas. He obviously did talk a good bit about Mike Thomas. But if you want to hear that, you can go check it out in the Wednesday morning edition of the podcast. But I do want to get into a bunch of the other stuff he said. And I thought that the Eric McCoy parts of his answers were interesting, because one of the differences we're going to see this year compared to last year is Derek Carr is going to be setting the protections. Derek Carr is going to be the one pointing out the mic and setting the mic and setting, how the offense is going to operate. And the protection is going to operate. But Eric McCoy is still kind of in that mode of calling out the protections, because that's what he's done. And when Derek said, it's like, well, at least he's right. I guess it's not a bad thing if he's right. But that is kind of fun. And he also pointed out that Eric McCoy is, very effort driven. And he pointed out that, he's going through film talking about how, he's sent a clip to Eric McCoy of him getting downfield and blocking. And said, if everyone plays like this, we're going to win a lot of games. And, he obviously does that all the time. So, it's not something that you're going to talk a lot about. But Eric said that the clip he sent was from 2020. And I'm pretty sure that the clip we're talking about is the one against the Packers with Alvin Kamara on that 50-yard run, where Alvin's basically jogging. And Eric is full sprint out in front of him, plowing the road. Because, I think if you saw that, if you're a quarterback and you saw that type of effort, you'd be like, okay, I'm encouraging this. And that's what Derek has been doing to this point, is watching film, kind of learning about the players he's going to be now teammates with, And then as he sees stuff, and he's mentioned this in the previous press conferences, he's sending clips to them and saying, yes, do this. This is great. We want to keep doing this. He's not sending the don't do this clips yet. But I think that's a good example of that. And it's also a good example of something that what makes Eric McCoy such a great player beyond just being a good center is he does get downfield. He does block. He does plow the road. That Alvin Kamara touchdown doesn't happen if he's not there. It's still like a 20, 30-yard run, but it's a touchdown because of the effort Eric McCoy made to get downfield. So I don't think we're overselling that at all.
No, and I mean, that makes me smile thinking about that play. We didn't see any of that kind of last season. I felt like, especially from Alvin, unfortunately, those big explosive plays kind of deal. And that definitely needs to return this season, obviously. But yeah, with Derek Carr, hearing him too, there's just something about his presence as well that's, I don't know, very relaxing, or you kind of like lean in a little more to hear what he's got to say, kind of thing.
Yeah, he's the type of guy that when he's talking to a room of people, you feel like he's talking directly to you. And I don't know how to quantify that, but it's very true. Like he makes you feel like it's all just a group of friends talking. Right. And in those press conference settings, I know like people listening probably haven't been in them, but it's not always like that. It's a lot of times it's combative. A lot of times it's people like not really listening to your question and answering it anyway. And it's like everyone does it differently. I think quarterbacks have to be trained a little bit in that regard because they have to do it all the time. And so it's a lot more noticeable. Like if I talked to Jordan Howden in the locker room after the second set of OTAs, and it's like he's a rookie. It was very clear that he's still kind of figuring out how to do this. You don't really have to do that in college, especially as a safety. You're not talking to the media that much. And so you're kind of learning as a quarterback, you have to do it at least once a week, every post game. Like you better get good at it. Otherwise it's going to be very clear and it's going to reflect on you. And people are going to be like, well, why do you say this? Why do you say that? This is awkward. Oh no. What does this mean? You got to be good at it. And he is good at it. And as I mentioned before, we listened to that. I thought the Jon Gruden answer, I mean, he could have given you a PC like, blah, blah, blah. He didn't. And, he went into it and he explains like, yes, I don't hate the guy, right. Like he's like, and he mentioned that season for the Raiders was very rough. It was also the Henry Ruggs season where he got arrested for, I think it was involuntary manslaughter or like, whatever. He hit someone's car. It's a whole ordeal. I'm not going to lay it out here. You can go look it up if you want more details. But yeah, that was a trying season for that team. And at the time, he said a lot of the same things, which is like, I'm not here to be the judge and jury of this situation. I'm here to, love people. And, I think that's an interesting approach. He also pointed out that it was not him asking for them to bring Jon Gruden in. It was the front office and the coaching staff who organized that and brought him in. Yeah, and one other thing he said was if anybody knows something about Derek that he doesn't know himself, it would be Jon Gruden. And that alone should be a good enough answer for like, was it worth bringing in Jon Gruden and maybe courting some of the chaos that ensued? Yes, because he does have that information. And you can hear the way Derek talks about it. Like he did feel like that. He said he played his best football. Like we've all kind of said he played his best football under Jon Gruden. I think it means a lot more when the guy himself says that he was the best version of himself as a football player under Jon Gruden. So, I was interested to hear his kind of take on that situation. And, I was not shortchanged because I thought that was an excellent answer from him.
No, that was definitely one when it was asked, you're like, ooh, what's going to happen here? Yeah. Because it's a little uncomfortable, not a great, obvious situation, what happened with Jon Gruden and his departure from the NFL. So it was a little uncomfortable, but the way Carr talked about it made it a lot more relatable, made it more of a comfortable topic to discuss. And yeah, I mean, it was good to hear that side of it because there has been a lot of negative buzz around Gruden coming to visit the Saints. He hasn't been hired. And I get it from folks. It's not an easy topic to talk about, but with what happened in the past there with the emails or whatever, they were just mining his knowledge of Derek Carr and that offense where, like you said, it was the best version of himself. So why wouldn't you get more detail and want to implement that in your system kind of thing. It's not anything where the Saints are taking on Jon Gruden's past doings kind of thing. I don't know. It definitely, all in all, an awkward situation that I feel I'm glad it's not something that's constantly ongoing that we have to answer to. Like Gruden's in the building all the time.
By the time training camp starts, it will be a topic that everyone's like, oh, remember when everyone was talking about Jon Gruden for like 3 days? I think we're going to move on. But, and it probably sounds like I'm kind of geeking out about Derek Carr in all of these podcasts. And trust me, that was not the goal when I started this whole OTA process. Like, I was just curious, but I've just been impressed. I mean, everything he has done, he's looked sharp, right? He looks like a guy who did not just show up. You see those videos from Bucs training camp of Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask just airballing receivers, right? And it's like, that's just not something we have seen. Like, balls have hit the ground at Saints camp, but it's still been like, okay, yeah, that was a good read. It was a good throw. He's handled it well. He talks like a guy who's been here forever. He presents himself as a leader. You can tell that his teammates see him that way and believe in him that way already. I mean, I know this is overhype season. This is when you get way too excited about stuff, when you're seeing everyone on the field in shorts looking great because they're all professional athletes, as they should. And you suddenly talk yourself into 2 or 3 more wins than maybe you thought. But like, if you were wondering whether the stumbling block was going to be Derek Carr and the way he acclimated to this city and system and team and roster, I think that question's been answered. I really do.
Yeah, I would say the comfort level has been super high. The transition here all around for Carr has been seamless, and I'm with you too. It's like, you don't want to blow things way out of proportion, but I mean, it's been nothing but positive, glowing reviews so far. Obviously, mandatory mini camps upcoming, and then the big boy when training camp comes on. When the pads are on and everything's going on, we'll see more from it. But yeah, Derek Carr's done everything and more right now of what you've wanted from a new quarterback coming into this system and taking over as the leader of your squad. And yeah, just when you're looking forward to his press conference kind of thing, it's like, oh, great, he's talking today. That's already a bonus because, yeah, like I said last year, the Andy Dalton sessions weren't too entertaining, or even you didn't gain anything out of them as a reporter.
Yeah, I look forward to his press conferences. The same way I look forward to like an Alvin Kamara press conference. Like, you're going to get content as a reporter. You're going to get something that you can sink your teeth into, and that's not something you could say of everybody. One thing I do want to mention before we get out of here, and I don't think I gave it enough due yesterday, is you talking about Derek Carr looks sharp in training camp. Jameis Winston, I thought, had an excellent day yesterday. In the 7-on-7s, he went 4 for 4 with 3 touchdowns and another completion, which would have been like down to the 1. And he looked good. Like, he looks like he's on point. And, I don't think he's going to – it's not a competition in camp between him and Derek Carr. But I think it is a competition to some extent between him and Jake Haener, as you kind of say, okay, where's the backup? And I think Jake has looked fine, but Jameis, I think, when you're talking about the quality of backup quarterbacks across the NFL, and I've said this, I think the Saints probably have the best backup quarterback in the NFL. And if we've seen it, right? We've seen Trevor Siemian start games. We've seen Teddy Bridgewater start games. We've seen Taysom Hill start games. We've seen Andy Dalton start games. What are the odds that you go 17 games this season and Jameis doesn't get on the field? Feels slim. So, that's something that, you could say, oh, who cares? But, a guy who's been in the offense for 4 seasons now and understands the schemes and can do it on, as a reflex, that's a luxury. And he looks locked in right now. So that's,
and obviously with him, he talked about too, when we got to speak with Jameis about the fact that he's preparing the same way, whether he's the starter or the backup, just getting ready to be ready whenever called upon. And yeah, it's a great point of the fact that we're not seeing him lumbering at all. There's not any kind of gimp to his step. He seems to be fully healed, at least. I know he talked about there's still some things he's trying to get back from, but overall, he doesn't look like he's struggling on the field that like we saw in the past.
No, and then so to back that up, the 11-11s, he had 4 reps. One was a run. There was a false start, but I think it was on the center. He completed 2 balls to Malik Flowers, which is good to see him getting into the action. And one was for a touchdown. It might have been out of bounds, but it was still a good throw. Like the only question was whether Malik made the wide receiver play of getting your feet inbounds. It was a dart to the back of the end zone as the play kind of broke down. And then the incompletion was a back shoulder throw to A.T. Perry, which we've talked about. He's not really doing the job there right now. So, I don't think the issue was the throw. Just like Jake Haener's, I don't think the issue was the throw. But either way, I'm happy to see him kind of making, kind of putting his flag in the ground and being like, no, this is I'm owning this backup role, because he has so far, and you never question the leadership from him in that position. So, I think he said the Saints have the best quarterback room in the NFL, top to bottom. If they perform all year like they looked yesterday in that practice, I like it. And we always say it's worth mentioning the offense always starts a little bit faster than the defense, because the defense isn't allowed to hurt you until the games start. So they're at a little bit of a disadvantage. They can't hit you. They can't separate you from the ball the way they want to. All they can do is make hands plays on the ball. So
I think it was the first organized team activity where we saw Olave go up for that ball, and it's like, well, Marcus May probably could have tattooed him right there.
Yeah, there was a play. Well, one of those completions I just talked about to Malik Flowers. It was just an in route. If he throws that ball and he makes that catch in a game, you're lucky if he survives it, let alone makes the catch. I mean, he might come off the field with a concussion. Like, that's the type of, there was someone there ready to blow him up and they have to peel off, right? Like, that's just how it works. But still, you're just getting timing down. And I think Malik Flowers looks pretty good. I think he's probably a guy that ends up on the practice squad, but it's good to see him getting some chemistry with the quarterbacks.
Saints having some luck with these, return guys turning into, flash receivers.
Yeah, it's nothing new. They do it every year. So it's
Right.
just like you kind of watch it and wait, because it's like, okay, when is it going to happen? It's going to happen anyway. All right, let's wrap that segment up. We're going to come back and we're going to do a quick segment on the stock up, stock down. We're just going to pick one player for each and go forward. And that's how we're going to close out this episode. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do that. Give us a rating, give us a review. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube and you want to do that, I highly recommend it. It's a good time. Follow us on Twitter at Saints_pod. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak and Steve Geller over there at Steve Geller WWL. That's GELLER, not like Sarah Michelle. All right, y'all. Stick around. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. And as promised, we're going to get to the Saints stock watch. Thankfully, a bit better than the actual stock watch of reality, which I don't want to talk about because my investments are not going well. But any investment you have in the Saints these days is going to feel good. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. And so, let's just get right into it. Steve, who would you say is your let's start with the stock down players. Let's start with the bad and end with the good. Who would you say is your stock down player after 3 practices? And keep in mind, we got 3 practices over the past 3 weeks. We're going to get 3 practices in 3 days next week. So this really means nothing beyond, I think this player has a bit that, they're coming into minicamp with more to prove. Like, they have to show up and do better, which they should. They very well could. So don't take this as, oh, we're out on this player. Take this as this guy did not help his stock, maybe struggled a bit at OTAs and needs to pick it up. So who would your stock down player be after 3 OTA practices?
No, like you said, it's not like I'm totally off of this player at all and think he's not going to make the team. But picking on a rookie and 6th-round draft pick, A.T. Perry, who's had a pretty tough go in these early goings. Coming in, you kept hearing about strong hands, contested catches, and we really haven't seen that in those 3 sessions that we've gotten to see. You mentioned him, obviously that last segment of should have coming down with that ball in the end zone from Jameis Winston. Really unfortunate because it looked like a perfect pass in the situation there. And he just, I don't know, maybe he'll come alive when the pads are on kind of thing, but 6'3", 205 just hasn't really caught my eye enough for the right reasons.
No, I think that's a good answer. And yeah, I've talked about it, and you know, like Marcus Colston had a very rough start to his first training camp as well. People have pointed that out, and he's a 6th-round pick, right? Like he's not a guy you would anticipate just shows up and balls out from day one, or at least it's not something you would expect. Maybe he could, but you're not going to be like, wow, he has no chance because he didn't show up day one and just moss everybody. That said, he's got to be better. You got to make the team first. Like that's got to be your first priority. And right now, if you had to pick the roster today, if you had to pick a 53-man roster today, he would not be on it. Agreed. And that's not a crazy thing to say about a 6th-round pick. Jordan Jackson didn't make the roster last year. He was a 6th-round pick. So it's you got to go out there and earn it. And I think this is a deep roster. There might be some cracks in it more so this year than years past, where you can maybe find some extra spots on there. But this stiff competition. And so you're going to have to figure that out. The guy I would say came in with all the, I don't want to say hype, but he came in with all the excitement around him. Is a UDFA, is Nick Anderson. I like Nick Anderson a lot, but everyone wants to see Nick Anderson make this roster. All the locals want to see Nick Anderson make the roster, but what people need to remember is he's not going to make the roster because he's got a fun story. The Saints don't do that. They don't. Just like they didn't pick Tajay Spears when he was on the board. They picked Kendra Miller, a guy who hasn't even been able to practice yet because he's got a knee injury, right? If they were concerned about, health, that Tajay was right there. So like they're not going to do anything for Nick that they wouldn't do for anybody else just because he's got a fun story. And yesterday, and I like all I can go off of is the three practices we saw, right? Like I'm not going to make any extra analysis on, okay, maybe he's doing really well in the classroom, maybe he's doing this. All I saw yesterday was him getting picked on in team drills in coverage, right? And for him to make this roster, to latch on even as a practice squad guy, he's going to have to show that he can cover because he is an undersized linebacker. He can't be a Sam. I don't think he profiles to the mic. I think he is a will or nothing, or maybe a converted safety, maybe a Landon Collins type player. But you got to be able to cover tight ends. And those were the players that were beating him up. We talked about Jesse James catching a touchdown. It was over Nick Anderson, right? You got to be able to compete there, and he hasn't. Again, he's not wearing pads. He's not able to hit anybody. So he's got a lot of time to make an impact. But if you were hopeful to see him kind of go out and make a bunch of splash plays the way Jordan Howden has, that has not been the case. So he's my stock down player right now. I think it's a little unfair, but I had to pick somebody. And he's it for me. One other player who might be an honorable mention, and I can give you one of these as well. And it's very unfair, but it's Eno Benjamin. And I don't know what he's dealing with from a health perspective, but man, these are the practices where you had a chance to show up and prove like you got something, you got some juice, and he just hasn't been able to contribute. And I'm not going to hold the injury against him, but like this, Alvin's going to be there next week, right? Like the running backs are going to start filling in. Kendra Miller is going to be available eventually.
Right. When you had this time to start getting some work in, and you're not doing nothing.
Right. Like this was a prime opportunity where it's basically Jamal Williams and a bunch of UDFAs. This was when you could have like kind of made some inroads, and he just wasn't able to do it. So, to me, that's some stock down of, maybe he could have shown up and made some splash plays over these couple days where he was basically the only guy in town along with the newcomer in Jamal, and he just wasn't able to. So he's another guy that, like, again, we're not going off of much, but that's something where it's like, this is when I wanted to see him, and he hasn't been out there.
No, and he's just all around been a big question, obviously. Even when he was, healthy last year, we didn't see him get much run at all. No.
Exactly. And I don't know what the injury is. He wasn't injured at the end of last season. So what could he be dealing with now? I don't know. He has been out there. He has been participating from that perspective. So it's like you can't complain about that. I just think it's disappointing for a guy like that, who I think has an uphill climb to potentially make this roster to begin with, he's going to have to do it on special teams. He's going to have to do it in ways that are not RB1, and you just haven't seen it. So that's my other stock down guy.
Yeah, the stock down market, it's really tough to, pull names at this point, just because of the limited viewing and the fact that we're not seeing much going on. But yeah, we're just giving you what we've kind of seen, kind of thing. And yeah, for me, other than, like I said, Perry, really there hasn't been another guy that's been such a huge letdown for me. So I don't have an honorable mention for stock down. I did have one for stock up, who you just mentioned though, with Jordan
We'll
Howard.
We'll get into that in a second. One more I'll give you, and it's only because of opportunity. It's Keith Kirkwood. I don't know why.
You're right there.
Derek Carr's been throwing to him a lot. Derek Carr has been giving him opportunities. He just hasn't made them. Yeah. And like, this was a chance for Keith Kirkwood to maybe steal a spot on the roster. He made some splash plays. He got targeted twice in the end zone. He couldn't make the catch. Maybe there was a hold on one of them. Still fight through that, make the catch. So I don't even think it's technically stock down, but it's more of a missed opportunity. I think I would classify it as, because I was talking to Nick Underhill and I was like, someone needs to go tell Derek Keith Kirkwood isn't his top target. And Derek, I think Nick was like, he'll learn.
Right.
And but and I can't like he's gotten chances, in ways that I did not expect. Kawan Baker's also got a few targets and he's made those catches. He's gotten open. So yeah, I mean, I think if you're on the Keith Kirkwood train, which I like Keith Kirkwood a lot, probably a missed opportunity for him.
Yeah, I feel like even like a Traquan has done more than Keith Kirkwood at this point.
Spoilers. And so yeah, and I talked about Traquan in the last episode, so he's not technically going to be my stock up player, but we'll start with him because I do want to let you hear what Dennis Allen said about him and know that his stock is definitely up. And we don't even have to talk about it because he caught 3 touchdowns yesterday. Here's what DA said about Traquan Smith.
Look, I think Traquan's another one of those guys that over the last couple of years, man, he's had to do a lot of the dirty work, and I don't know that he has been at full health for the last couple of years. I think he's healthy right now, and so I see him being a valuable piece of what we're trying to get accomplished. And look, I think there's going to be some good competition in that receiver room.
And yeah, I like you go into every offseason being like, maybe this is the year Traquan gets cut. If he plays the way he did yesterday and he has the type of energy he did yesterday and he stays healthy, he's making this roster.
Yeah, that's definitely one that for whatever reason, he always draws my ire. I'm always out to get Traquan, it seems like. I think we probably picked on him a lot last year too. But yeah, you can't argue what he's done at this point, and the fact that he's got the experience, obviously, in this system is going to make him a tougher out. And I feel like he's had good chemistry with Jameis. It'll be interesting to see how it develops more with Derek Carr.
Again, but more chemistry with Drew than he did with Jameis, personally. I mean, it's easy to forget. Traquan Smith caught 2 touchdowns in the divisional playoff game in 2020. He caught a touchdown pass in a must-win game in 2021 from Trevor Siemian against the Falcons. I think it was Trevor Siemian. Also, it might have been Taysom Hill. I can't recall. It was in that game that Taysom Hill got hurt and Trevor Siemian took over. That was a game the Saints desperately had to win. And at the time, it felt like that was a win that got them to the playoffs. Obviously, the Rams did not cooperate and blew a lead to the 49ers. But, like, he's made big catches in big moments. He's had a 10-catch game. So, like, when you talk about, Bobby Hebert always wants to say skins on the wall, right? Like, that's, like, have you done it before? He has. Yeah. And, I don't know, like, that. The fact that he does all the dirty work, too, makes it a lot easier to keep him on the roster. But he has also contributed. If he can be more consistent, you feel like, yeah, it makes sense to keep him around. And he's catching touchdown passes from Jake Haener. He's looking good. He's spiking it over the goalposts. I think his stock is definitely up. But that was kind of just the catch-all. Who is your kind of official stock-up player from the first 3 days of OTAs?
You mentioned Jordan Howden. He's definitely one of those guys that, to me, has impressed. I like the pursuit I've seen, his change of direction, even the breaking on the ball. Been good in coverage. The safety was a 5th-round pick out of Minnesota. But number one for me is a 5th-rounder from last year in linebacker DeMarco Jackson. I think he's taken advantage of those opportunities. Some other guys, we've talked about haven't been, where this is the time they need to step it up. Jackson, you see that speed, sideline to sideline. He's broken up some passes and just really mainly been working with the second team defense, I'll say, at middle linebacker at the moment. But a guy that I'm interested very much to see more of and excited for DeMarco, because he missed obviously all of last year. So it's like a redshirt year for him.
I agree with that. And I think DA said yesterday he's been working at the mic, which makes sense. I think he does profile as a Mike linebacker, and that's good because I think you do need to figure out if Demario Davis misses a game, who takes over. Do you move Pete Werner over there and figure it out? I don't think so. I think you're actually weaker at the depth behind Pete Werner, and you want to keep him at the will in that kind of volume tackler kind of idea. So who would take over if Demario misses a game? I don't know who would take over if Pete Werner misses a game either. So like the kind of ironing out that depth is going to be a big question in training camp. And it's going to kind of determine whether you kind of need to go out and find somebody and bring them in. Right now, I don't think you're planning to do that because I think DeMarco has had a good start. So I think that's a good pick.
You mentioned behind Werner, and real quick coming to mind, maybe Orgy, but we haven't seen enough, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's tough to get a really good read on Orgy. I don't know if he's a will. I think he's more of a I think he's going to compete with DeMarco. I just don't know if he can cover. I think that's been kind of the question about him coming out of Vanderbilt. It's one of the reasons he didn't get drafted is I don't know if he is that kind of cover linebacker. I would look more toward Nephi Sewell, maybe Nick Anderson for that job. And then, someone's got to play Sam. Someone's got to contribute on special teams and be a kind of dual threat there. So, it's possible. I think Orgy moves really well. Just don't know if the coverage instincts are there. So we'll figure that out. But there was a few options that I kind of looked at for the stock up player. Lucas Krull is a guy who I think, I don't know if you can say stock up because I think his stock felt like it was high last year because he's impressive as a pass catcher. He moves. You see him running around. You're like, man, that guy can fly. But that's not the question with him. The question is, can he block? And that's what's going to be the determining factor of does he get on the field at some point. But you can definitely see the vision for him as a potential receiving tight end.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like I said, one of the segments when we were talking about tight end, suddenly that group seems has a lot more depth than we anticipated, I think.
Yeah, it went from who the hell is going to play tight end to like, oh man, there's so many tight ends.
Who are we going to keep? Right.
Yeah. Who's getting cut? I thought Malik Flowers had a good day yesterday. He would be an option, but I think the correct answer for stock up has to be Blake Grupe.
Everyone's like, who?
I mean, I outweigh this guy by 50 pounds. He's 5'7", let's see. I'm gonna read you the listing on the roster, which they typically will weigh these guys soaking wet, right? Like,
yeah,
they're not underselling weights on this roster. Blake Grupe is listed as 5'7", 156. Now, he's a kicker. You don't have to go out there and make tackles, although in some instances it's nice when you can. He's not going to be confused for Thomas Morstead. That's for sure. He's not going to be confused for Lou Headley. That's for sure. Guy who was definitely punting it off the ceiling yesterday. Got a cannon for a leg. But what he did do is go out there at the end of the final OTA practice. This is the first time we've really seen him kick, at least, from an extended session. He went 5 for 5, and his final kick was either 58 or 59 yards, and it had some space over the bar. Right. Now, this is indoors. There's no wind. It's a controlled environment. This is no pressure. There's no game pressure. But, that kick was about a third of his weight if you compared the yardage to the pounds. And if you're going in and you're saying, okay, Will, I don't think Will's going to lose the job out of camp. But if Will has the type of struggles he had last year and suddenly you're like, man, we got to find something. I think you look at this guy and you're like, okay, I can see the vision. And that's a big jump up from a stock perspective from where I was seeing that guy in the locker room and thinking maybe he was one of the players like nephews or something. He's so small.
Right. It's like you saw Demario Davis's kid hanging out. You're like, hey, who's this kid?
about the same size. Mario Davis's kid is like 10.
But definitely impressed, obviously, being able to hit 58, 59 yards because, like you said, not an imposing, I don't want to say, like kickers have to be these huge guys either, but it just amazes me. You think 5'7", and you're still able to get that kind of swing or momentum from your kick. I don't know really the dynamics of what goes into it, honestly, but it's definitely impressive. I thought, obviously, being 6 for 6 on the day, going out with that bang on the long one, he would be honorable mention for me for sure.
And he's a rookie kicker. You would profile that he probably will get a little stronger, and I don't know if that's going to affect your kick distance, but I think as you're a professional kicker, it should, right? Like you should be able to maybe get some more yardage a few years into your career compared to where you are on the first 3 practices of your NFL career. So, I think they cut Alex Quevedo. They like Blake Grupe. I don't think he's going to make the roster. I don't think it's really going to be a competition in camp between him and Will Lutz. But I think you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, maybe we have a stash here, and you're gonna look at him. But if we're talking about stock, I think he opened a lot of eyes with that kicking session, and you're gonna go from there.
And definitely, we obviously, you talk about injuries to anybody, but you have to have that short list of players sometimes, that list of guys to go to. And instead of, I'm sure they'd still bring in maybe some other veterans to work out kind of thing, but what you have in this kid right now. And it could be something that they call upon if Lutz struggles, if he gets hurt kind of thing. And we'll just see how Grupe continues to develop going forward in training camp. Another Notre Dame guy added to the roster. Well, not added to the roster, but brought in right now this year.
He's technically on the roster right now.
Yeah.
We'll close this out with a guy who I think his stock has stayed the same, but that still feels low. And that needs to change over the next month, 2 months, because he's going to be a very important piece on this roster. And that's Peyton Turner. Here's what Dennis Allen had to say about kind of what his expectations are, what he has to do.
With a lot of these guys, they're out here every day and they're working and they're continuing to get better. And Peyton's no different than any of the other guys. And I think really for all of this, I don't think this is about trying to make a final evaluation on anything. This is just how am I getting better each day that I come out here. And I think all of our guys are working to do that.
What's the biggest thing he needed to work on besides improved health?
Well, I think that's number one. It's really hard to make an assessment because he hasn't been available enough. And so he certainly has the talent, and so it's really about being out here and being able to be available every day.
And I think that's something we get into, like it's not necessarily the availability in games either. It's the availability to practice. Like you talk about 3 years in, you can't make an evaluation on this guy. It's not because he hasn't played in games. It's because there's points where he's just not available to practice and you're not getting the type of looks at him that you need to be getting. And so to me, I want to see him out there. I want to see him participating all throughout camp. I want to see him staying healthy and working hard. And, that it's when you get to this point and you're still hearing that, you start to question the commitment level for a guy. And to me, that does drop your stock, but he has been out there every day. We've been at OTAs. He has been working. Maybe this is the year you kind of turn that around. I'd like to come back and do another version of this later in the preseason where I'm saying stock way up. Yeah. So because that's going to be a big question, I think, on the defensive line, which I would argue is still probably the biggest question mark of this roster is okay, who's going to contribute? Who's going to be in that rotation? Cam Jordan's there. Who's starting across from him? Is it Carl Granderson? Is it Peyton Turner? Are you kicking somebody out from the inside? I don't know. I think Colin Saunders has the body type where he can kick out. We'll find that out, but I think that's going to be a big question.
Yeah, with Turner, he's kind of my, kicking, whatever you want to say, guy I've been down on. Like on offense, it's been Traquan. For me on the defensive side, Turner obviously not being able to stay healthy. We just haven't really seen much from him at all, at least with a guy even like Marcus Davenport. When he was on the field, there were times he dominated offensive linemen and you saw him being able to, push them around kind of thing. For me, Peyton Turner, I don't know. I've got one really big highlight from him, and that's the block kicking against the Falcons in week 1. Other than that, there was a few sacks here and there, but nothing that I was really impressed by from him. So, yeah, he's a guy that I'm hoping, too, that we're talking about more come training camp or whenever we do our stock update. And, yeah, the arrow's going way up with him because, yeah, definitely needs to in that rotation along the D-line. You mentioned, there's guys like Passanio and whatnot, Granderson, but you spent the first-round pick on this guy. He's got to be on the field and available.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you talk about Marcus Davenport, and I think if you want to compare him to anybody in terms of I'm not sure about his commitment level and how much he actually enjoys the game of football.
Right. It's so crazy.
That's who I'd compare him to, because I never was convinced that Marcus Davenport really enjoyed the game of football. I was always questioning, like, is he working hard? Does he care? Because, and he's a little aloof, and you kind of got that impression. And I don't know, some players are just like that. Some guys, might seem that way, and you don't see what happens behind the scenes. But then you have an entire season where you have a half sack, and you're like,
and to me,
something's not computing here.
To me, with Davenport, he had so much self-doubt, and I don't think he ever got over that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the imposter syndrome, I'm sure, is pretty strong there. But yeah, I think that's where we can wrap it up. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this episode, got a lot of mileage out of it. This is Inside Black and Gold. We're going to be out there back on Tuesday. I think the practices for minicamp are Tuesday through Thursday. We're going to be out there for all 3 of those days. So, there's going to be a good bit of content to pull out of it. I know Steve is taken off, so it might be some solo environments here on the pod, but we'll get it done.
Yeah, unfortunately, had this plan before dates came out with camp, and out of everything to miss, it's like, great, now I'm missing mandatory mini camp when there's 3 sessions to access.
That's all right. I'll suffer. I'll suffer through. But yeah, so thanks everyone for listening. Hit the subscribe button. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. We have a Twitter account now. Go check it out at Saints_pod. Easy to remember. And yeah, we'll be coming at you early next week for more Saints practice content. Stick around. I'm sorry. As always, check out WWL.com for latest content. And thanks, y'all. Peace.
I guess you got to say now, too, like, subscribe, and follow.
Like, subscribe, and follow.
Who dat?